10 life-changing habits to build emotional resilience. Practical Buddhist wisdom. Buddhist teachings. Ever had one of those days where everything seems to go wrong? You spill coffee on your shirt, get stuck in traffic, and just when you think it can't get worse, someone throws a passive-aggressive comment your way. Instantly, your mood shifts. Frustration, annoyance, maybe even anger. And just like that, the day feels ruined. But have you ever met someone who doesn't seem to get rattled by anything? Someone who stays calm even when life throws curveballs at them? You wonder, how do they do it? Are they just wired differently? The truth is, emotional strength isn't something you're born with, it's something you build. And one of the best ways to develop it is by training your mind, just like you'd train your body. That's what Buddhism has been teaching for thousands of years. How to navigate life's chaos without getting lost in it. Imagine if, instead of reacting to every little thing that annoys you, you could pause, breathe, and choose your response. Imagine handling criticism without taking it personally. Imagine going through life with a steady mind, no matter what comes your way. That's what we're diving into today. 10 simple but powerful habits inspired by Buddhist wisdom that can help you build emotional resilience. You don't need to become a monk or meditate for hours. These are real, practical shifts that can change the way you experience life. So, are you ready to start seeing things differently? Let's get into it. Have you ever had someone say something to you that just stuck? Maybe it was a comment about your work, your personality, or even your dreams. Something that felt like a little dagger to the heart. And no matter how much you tried to shake it off, it kept replaying in your mind. We've all been there. Criticism can sting, sometimes more than we'd like to admit. But what if those words, those sharp little daggers, only had power because you were holding on to them? There's a story about a young man who went to see a wise monk. He was upset because people had been criticizing him, saying he wasn't smart enough, strong enough, or talented enough. He told the monk, "Their words keep following me. I can't seem to let them go." The monk listened, then picked up a small cup and held it out. "Take this," he said. The young man hesitated. "Take what?" The monk smiled. "If I had something in my hand and you refused to take it, to whom does it still belong?" The young man thought for a moment. "To you, of course." The monk nodded. "Exactly. And the same goes for insults and criticism. If you refuse to accept them, they remain with the giver. That's the thing about words, they only affect you if you take them in. But let's be honest, that's easier said than done. How do you actually stop letting negative words get under your skin? And what if, instead of letting them tear you down, you could use them to fuel your growth? It's easy to feel hurt when someone criticizes you. Maybe it's a comment about how you look, how you speak, or the way you do things. Sometimes, even a casual remark can linger in your mind longer than it should. But why does criticism affect us so much? A long time ago, belonging to a group meant survival. If the tribe rejected you, you were in danger. That's why we instinctively fear rejection, it's built into us. But not all criticism is a threat, and not all criticism is worth listening to. Some of it is actually useful. Some of it, however, says more about the person giving it than about you. The key is knowing which to take in and which to let go. Imagine criticism as two kinds of fire. One can warm you, guide you, and help you grow stronger. The other, it burns, destroys, and leaves nothing but ashes. The first kind comes from people who actually want to see you improve. A good coach, a caring friend, a mentor. People who point out where you can do better because they believe in your potential. It might not always feel good to hear, but deep down, you know it's meant to help. The second kind, though, comes from a different place. It's the words of someone who might be hurting themselves, someone who feels the need to bring others down just to make themselves feel better. This kind of criticism is rarely about you, it's about them. So the next time someone criticizes you, ask yourself, is this coming from someone who genuinely wants me to grow? Or is this just negativity that I don't need to carry? If it's the first, take it as fuel. If it's the second, let it go just like an untouched cup of poison. Think of every criticism as a weight at the gym. The first time you lift it, it feels heavy. It strains your muscles. But over time, as you keep pushing, it makes you stronger. There's a story about a young boy who wanted to be a great artist. Every time he showed his paintings, people laughed. They said he had no talent. But instead of quitting, he made a promise to himself. Every insult will be a reason to work harder. Years later, that boy's paintings hung in galleries, admired by thousands. And the same people who once mocked him now lined up to see his work. What if you did the same? What if, every time someone doubted you, you saw it as a challenge? Not to prove them wrong, but to prove to yourself how strong you really are. There's also a story about the Buddha and an angry man. This man walked up to the Buddha and started shouting insults. He called him names, tried to provoke him, waiting for a reaction. But the Buddha simply sat there, calm and unmoved. Frustrated, the man demanded, "Why aren't you reacting?" The Buddha asked, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse to accept it, to whom does it belong?" The man fell silent. Criticism is just like that. If you don't take it in, it stays with the giver. It doesn't have to become your burden. But let's take it one step further. What if, instead of just ignoring it, you could take that energy and turn it into something positive? Next time someone criticizes you, try this. Instead of reacting immediately, take a deep breath. Give yourself a moment to decide how to respond. Ask yourself, is this criticism helpful? Does it come from someone who truly wants to see me improve? If it's constructive, use it to grow. If it's just negativity, let it drift away, like a leaf floating down a river. This isn't about ignoring all feedback. It's about learning which voices to listen to and which ones to silence. At the end of the day, no one can make you feel small unless you let them. No words can hurt you unless you decide to carry them. So, the next time someone throws criticism your way, stop and ask yourself, do I want to hold on to this? Or will I let it go? And more importantly, how will you use it to become even stronger? Have you ever had someone say something to you that just stuck? Maybe it was a comment about your work, your personality, or even your dreams. Something that felt like a little dagger to the heart. And no matter how much you tried to shake it off, it kept replaying in your mind. We've all been there. Criticism can sting, sometimes more than we'd like to admit. But what if I told you that those words, those sharp little daggers, only have power if you choose to hold on to them? There's a story about a monk and a traveler. The traveler, full of frustration, told the monk, "People keep insulting me. Their words follow me everywhere. I feel like I can't escape them." The monk smiled and held out his hand as if offering something. "Here," he said, "take this." The traveler hesitated. "Take what?" The monk shook his head. "If I had something in my hand and you refused to take it, to whom does it still belong?" The traveler thought for a moment. "To you, of course." The monk nodded. "And the same goes for insults. If you refuse to accept them, they remain with the person who gave them. That's the thing about criticism, it only affects you if you take it in. But let's be honest, that's easier said than done. How do you actually stop letting negative words get under your skin? And what if, instead of letting them tear you down, you could use them to fuel your growth? Why does criticism hurt so much? Think back to the last time someone criticized you. Did it feel personal? Did you wonder if they were right? It's completely natural. As humans, we're wired to seek approval. A long time ago, belonging to a group meant survival. Rejection could mean danger. So when someone criticizes us, it can trigger that deep, instinctive fear. What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't belong? But here's the truth, not all criticism is worth listening to. Some of it comes from a place of care and can genuinely help us grow. Other times, it's just someone else projecting their own insecurities. The key is learning to tell the difference. Not all criticism is created equal. Imagine criticism as two kinds of fire. One can warm you, guide you, and help you grow stronger. The other, it burns, destroys, and leaves nothing but ashes. The first type comes from people who actually want to see you improve. A good coach, a caring friend, a mentor. People who point out where you can do better because they believe in your potential. It might not always feel good to hear, but deep down, you know it's meant to help. The second type, though, comes from a different place. It's the words of someone who might be hurting themselves, someone who feels the need to bring others down just to make themselves feel better. This kind of criticism is rarely about you, it's about them. So, the next time someone criticizes you, Ask yourself, is this coming from someone who genuinely wants me to grow? Or is this just negativity that I don't need to carry? If it's the first, take it as fuel. If it's the second, let it go just like an untouched cup of poison. Turning criticism into strength. Imagine someone tells you, "You're not good enough." That hurts, right? But what if, instead of letting it wound you, you flipped it? Think of every criticism as a weight at the gym. The first time you lift it, it feels heavy. It strains your muscles. But over time, as you keep pushing, it makes you stronger. There's a story about a young boy who wanted to be a great artist. Every time he showed his paintings, people laughed. They said he had no talent. But instead of quitting, he made a promise to himself. Every insult will be a reason to work harder. Years later, that boy's paintings hung in galleries, admired by thousands. And the same people who once mocked him now lined up to see his work. What if you did the same? What if every time someone doubted you, you saw it as a challenge? Not to prove them wrong, but to prove to yourself how strong you really are. When the Buddha faced an angry man. There's a well-known story about the Buddha and a man who was furious with him. This man walked up to the Buddha and started shouting insults. He called him names, tried to provoke him, waiting for a reaction. But the Buddha simply sat there, calm and unmoved. Frustrated, the man demanded, "Why aren't you reacting?" The Buddha asked, "If someone offers you a gift and you refuse to accept it, to whom does it belong?" The man fell silent. Criticism is just like that. If you don't take it in, it stays with the giver. It doesn't have to become your burden. But let's take it one step further. What if, instead of just ignoring it, you could take that energy and turn it into something positive? How to train your mind to handle criticism. Next time someone criticizes you, try this. 1. Pause. Instead of reacting immediately, take a deep breath. Give yourself a moment to decide how to respond. 2. Ask yourself, is this criticism helpful? Does it come from someone who truly wants to see me improve? 3. Use it or lose it. If it's constructive, use it to grow. If it's just negativity, let it drift away, like a leaf floating down a river. This isn't about ignoring all feedback. It's about learning which voices to listen to and which ones to silence. Your peace is yours to keep. At the end of the day, no one can make you feel small unless you let them. No words can hurt you unless you decide to carry them. So, the next time someone throws criticism your way, stop and ask yourself, do I want to hold on to this? Or will I let it go? And more importantly, how will you use it to become even stronger? There's a saying that the strongest trees grow in the harshest winds. It's easy to admire a tree standing tall in the sunshine, its leaves glowing in the golden light, swaying gently with the breeze. But what truly makes it strong is not the days of calm. It's the storms it has endured, the heavy rains, the howling winds, the seasons of drought. Without them, it would never have grown deep roots, never have learned how to stand firm. Life is like that, isn't it? When things are going well, we feel at peace. But the moment something difficult happens, when we face rejection, loss, or misunderstanding, it's as if a storm is raging inside of us. We feel shaken, unsure, even broken. But what if, instead of seeing challenges as something unfair, we saw them as part of our training? There's an old belief that the strongest warriors are not the ones who have had an easy life, but the ones who have been tested the most. They didn't become strong because they wanted to suffer. They became strong because they faced suffering and grew through it. Rejection tests our patience. Loss tests our ability to let go. Misunderstanding tests our compassion. Think about the last time you felt hurt by someone's words or actions. Maybe they misunderstood your intentions, or maybe they pushed you away when all you wanted was connection. Stung, didn't it? But what if that moment was a lesson in patience, in understanding, in learning to love without expecting anything in return? Imagine a potter shaping a clay cup. Before it can become something beautiful, it has to be put through intense heat in the kiln. If it cracks, it wasn't ready yet. But if it withstands the fire, it becomes something unbreakable. What if every challenge you face is a test to see how strong you are becoming? What if life isn't trying to break you, but to shape you? We often think that if we work hard enough, if we do everything right, life will finally stop testing us. But that's not how it works. Life doesn't get easier, we just get better at handling it. A seasoned sailor doesn't hope for calm waters. They learn to navigate the storm. It's easy to say, but I didn't ask for this challenge. Of course not. No one does. But the most transformative moments in life often come from the things we never planned. A heartbreak that teaches us to love more deeply. A failure that pushes us towards something even greater. A loss that opens our eyes to what truly matters. If you expect life to always be easy, you will always be disappointed. But if you train yourself to see every challenge as an opportunity to grow, you'll develop the kind of emotional resilience that nothing can break. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can always control how you respond. And one of the greatest things you can ever learn is this: nothing lasts forever. A Buddhist monk once held up a beautiful ceramic cup and smiled. "This cup is already broken," he said. The people around him looked confused. The cup was whole, uncracked, perfect in its form. He continued, "One day someone will drop it, or maybe the wind will knock it off a table. It will shatter. But I am at peace because I have already accepted this. Right now, in this moment, I can still enjoy its beauty. And when it breaks, I won't be sad, because I never held on to the illusion that it would last forever." We spend so much of our lives fearing loss. We cling to people, to happiness, to things we love, hoping they will never change. But change is the nature of life. A flower does not bloom forever, but that does not mean we should not appreciate its beauty while it lasts. The seasons shift, the tides rise and fall, the sun sets so that it can rise again. When we understand impermanence, we stop fearing it. We stop resisting change. We stop holding on so tightly to the good moments, trying to make them last forever. And we stop falling apart when things don't go our way, because we understand that nothing is permanent. Not our struggles, not our sadness, not even our pain. Think about the most difficult time in your life. The kind of pain that made you feel like you would never get through it. But you did. And now, looking back, you can see how time softened the sharp edges of that pain. How you eventually found peace again. If nothing lasts forever, that means the good times will pass, but so will the bad ones. A river does not resist the rocks in its path. It flows around them, knowing that nothing can stop its movement. Life is the same way. We are meant to move with it, not against it. The question is, when change comes, will you cling desperately to the past, or will you learn to flow? Will you resist the storms, or will you stand like a tree, letting them strengthen your roots? Will you fear the broken cup, or will you cherish it while it's whole, knowing that nothing was ever meant to last? There's something deeply freeing about sitting by a river, watching the water move effortlessly past you. Leaves float along the surface, carried by the current. Some small and delicate, others large and heavy. They drift, they swirl, they move in and out of sight without effort. You don't chase after them. You don't try to stop them. You simply sit and watch. Imagine if we treated our thoughts and emotions the same way. Most of the time, we don't. Instead, we grab onto them, analyzing, dissecting, reacting. A passing feeling of frustration turns into a story about how unfair life is. A fleeting moment of insecurity becomes evidence that we're not good enough. A single criticism lingers in our minds for days, growing heavier with time. But what if we didn't hold on so tightly? What if we simply let them pass like leaves on a river? Buddhists call this practice non-attachment. It doesn't mean you stop feeling. It doesn't mean you ignore your emotions. It means you learn to observe them without letting them control you. The next time someone upsets you, notice what happens inside. The tension in your chest, the heat rising in your face. It's automatic, isn't it? A reaction so quick that you barely even recognize it before you're already caught in its grip. But what if, instead of immediately labeling the person as wrong or bad, you paused for a moment? What if you simply observed? I feel anger rising. Where is this coming from? Does this truly matter? This space between feeling and reacting is where wisdom begins. A wise teacher once said, "Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional." The pain of being insulted, disappointed, or misunderstood is real. But suffering is what happens when we attach ourselves to the pain, replaying it over and over in our minds, feeding it, making it part of our identity. When we learn to observe without judgment, we stop feeding our suffering. We let it pass. Imagine if, instead of letting your emotions define you, you simply allowed them to exist. You could feel anger without becoming anger. You could experience sadness without being sad. You could recognize frustration without letting it dictate your next action. This doesn't mean we suppress our emotions. Quite the opposite. It means we allow them to arise naturally, acknowledging them, but also recognizing that they do not define us. You are not your anger. You are not your sadness. You are the sky, and emotions are just passing clouds. And just like the river, they will always keep moving. But in today's world, many of us don't even give ourselves the chance to observe. We are constantly consuming. Distractions, validation, entertainment, always searching for something outside ourselves to fill the spaces inside. If you've ever found yourself reaching for your phone the moment you feel bored, anxious, or lonely, you know exactly what this means. It's so easy to look for comfort outside of ourselves. A quick scroll through social media, a snack we don't really need, a show that helps us escape for a while. None of these things are bad, but when they become a habit, when we turn to them before turning inward, we weaken our ability to sit with discomfort. This is where emotional fasting comes in. Just as our bodies grow stronger when we practice physical fasting, our minds grow stronger when we practice emotional fasting, reducing our dependency on external validation, instant gratification, and constant stimulation. Many of us have unknowingly trained ourselves to avoid discomfort at all costs. The moment we feel uneasy, we look for something to soothe us. But what happens when we never allow ourselves to just sit with it? What happens when we never build the capacity to endure discomfort without distraction? Buddhist monks live simply, not because they reject pleasure, but because they understand that real peace isn't found in external comforts. It's found within. They don't rely on validation from others because they have cultivated self-awareness. They don't need constant entertainment because they have trained their minds to be at ease in stillness. They don't run from discomfort because they understand that suffering comes from attachment, not from the discomfort itself. Imagine if you began practicing this in small ways. The next time you feel bored, instead of reaching for your phone, you simply sit for a moment. The next time you feel frustrated, instead of immediately distracting yourself, you pause and observe. What is this feeling? Where is it coming from? The next time you feel the urge to seek external validation, you turn inward instead and ask, what do I truly need right now? Little by little, you begin to strengthen the part of you that is unshaken by the ups and downs of life. Think of it like training a muscle. At first, it's uncomfortable. Sitting with emotions you'd rather escape from isn't easy. But the more you practice, the stronger you become. The things that once felt unbearable become manageable. The discomfort that used to overwhelm you begins to pass more quickly. And eventually, you start to notice something incredible. You are okay, even when things aren't perfect. You don't need external distractions to soothe you. You don't need constant validation to feel worthy. You don't need to escape yourself because you have finally built a home within. And isn't that the kind of strength we all long for? Imagine a life where you are no longer at the mercy of your emotions, where you can experience sadness without drowning in it, where you can feel anger without letting it consume you, where you can face discomfort without immediately trying to run away. This isn't something that happens overnight. It's something you build moment by moment, breath by breath. But the next time you feel the pull of distraction, the urge to escape, to react, to seek something outside of yourself, pause, take a breath, sit with it, because the truth is, everything you've been searching for has been within you all along. The only question is, are you willing to sit still long enough to find it? There's something profoundly powerful about a person who remains calm when the world around them is in chaos. Have you ever met someone like that? The kind of person who, no matter how intense the situation, no matter how harsh the words thrown at them, stands still like a mountain against the wind? They don't raise their voice. They don't lash out. They simply remain, steady, unshaken. It's easy to admire such people, but it's even more powerful when you realize that this is a skill that can be cultivated. The ability to remain calm, to master non-reaction, is one of the highest forms of self-mastery. It's not about suppressing emotions. It's about understanding that not everything requires a response. There's a story about the Buddha that illustrates this perfectly. One day, a man came to the Buddha, filled with anger. He shouted insults, criticized him, and tried to provoke a reaction. But the Buddha simply sat there, serene and unbothered. After a while, the man grew frustrated and demanded, "Why don't you respond to me?" The Buddha smiled and said, "If someone offers you a gift, but you do not accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man thought for a moment and replied, "To the giver, of course." The Buddha nodded. "Then why should I accept your anger?" This simple yet profound lesson has the power to transform how we interact with the world. Think about the last time someone insulted you, criticized you, or tried to provoke you. Did you accept their negativity like a gift, carrying it with you long after the moment had passed? Or did you let it stay with them, refusing to let it disturb your peace? We often forget that we have a choice. The world will test you. People will test your patience. Life will not always go as planned. But your strength is not determined by what happens to you. It's determined by how you respond. Imagine someone trying to start a fire with wet wood. No matter how many matches they strike, the fire simply won't catch. Now imagine that you are that wet wood. If you don't react, negativity has no fuel. The fire burns out before it even begins. But most of the time, we don't allow ourselves to be wet wood. We are dry kindling, ready to ignite at the slightest spark. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and suddenly we're fuming. A coworker makes a passive-aggressive comment, and our whole day is ruined. We let small moments steal our peace. But what if we didn't? The next time you feel triggered, pause, breathe, ask yourself, is this really worth my energy? Most of the time, the answer will be no. There's a reason why silence is one of the most powerful responses. It's not weakness. It's wisdom. It's the understanding that reactivity gives power to what disturbs you, while non-reaction keeps that power in your hands. Think about a time when you reacted impulsively, only to regret it later. Maybe you sent an angry text in the heat of the moment. Maybe you snapped at someone who didn't deserve it. Maybe you held on to resentment, allowing someone else's words or actions to live in your mind long after they had forgotten about it. Now, imagine how different it would have been if you had simply paused. There's a well-known practice in Buddhism called the sacred pause, the simple act of creating space between stimulus and response. Instead of letting emotion drive your actions, you take a moment to breathe, to observe, to choose your next step. It's in that pause where clarity arises. It's in that pause where true power is found. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and renowned psychiatrist, once said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom." This space, the pause before reaction, is where true mastery begins. But how do we cultivate this skill in everyday life? It starts with awareness. The next time you feel anger, frustration, or irritation rising within you, simply notice it. Instead of reacting instantly, take a deep breath. Feel the sensation of the emotion in your body. Ask yourself, where is this coming from? Is this truly worth my peace? Often, we'll realize that most things that upset us are fleeting. They don't deserve the energy we give them. This doesn't mean we suppress our emotions. It means we respond with wisdom instead of reacting with impulse. Imagine a cup of muddy water. If you keep stirring it, the water remains cloudy. But if you set the cup down and let it be, the dirt settles and the water becomes clear. Your mind is the same way. When faced with negativity, if you keep engaging, stirring, and reacting, you only create more chaos. But if you remain still, everything settles. A monk once said, "You are not the storm, you are the sky. The storm will pass, but you remain." When you master the art of non-reaction, you become the sky. No matter what storms arise, you remain clear, expansive, and untouched. So, the next time someone tries to provoke you, the next time life presents you with an unexpected challenge, ask yourself, am I kindling or am I wet wood? Am I the storm or am I the sky? And most importantly, is this truly worth my peace? There's something unsettling about thinking of worst-case scenarios. Most people avoid it altogether, as if ignoring the possibility of hardship will somehow protect them from it. It's human nature to want to stay in the warmth of optimism, to tell ourselves that everything will be okay. But life, as we all come to realize, doesn't work that way. The storm comes whether we prepare for it or not. Buddhist monks, however, take a different approach. Instead of avoiding thoughts of suffering, they meditate on it. Instead of pretending that loss and hardship won't come, they contemplate it deeply. Not because they are pessimistic, but because they understand a fundamental truth. Fear only controls you when you refuse to face it. Imagine for a moment that you're walking through a dense forest at night. You hear rustling in the bushes, an unfamiliar sound, and immediately, your mind fills with panic. Is it a wild animal? Something dangerous? Your heart races, your breath shortens, and for a few moments, fear has complete control over you. But then you shine a flashlight in the direction of the noise, only to find that it was nothing more than the wind moving the leaves. That's what fear is. It's uncertainty wrapped in darkness. It's the unknown, given power by your imagination. But the moment you shine a light on it, it loses its grip. This is why monks regularly practice dark visualization, the art of preparing the mind for the worst. They meditate on impermanence, on death, on loss, not to invite suffering, but to make peace with it before it arrives. Because when you have already looked at your fears head-on, when you have already walked through the darkest corners of your mind and survived, there is nothing left to be afraid of. Think about it, how much of our suffering comes not from actual events, but from the fear of those events. The fear of rejection often feels worse than rejection itself. The fear of failure cripples more dreams than failure ever could. But what if you had already faced these things in your mind? What if, instead of running from the thought of hardship, you trained yourself for it? A samurai once said, "A warrior does not hope to avoid battle. He prepares for it." This doesn't mean living in constant dread. It means cultivating the mental strength to meet whatever comes, so that when difficulty arises, it does not shake you. It means asking yourself, what if I lost everything? What if things didn't go as planned? What if the worst actually happened? Most people don't ask these questions. They avoid them, clinging to the illusion that as long as they don't think about suffering, it won't touch them. But life doesn't work like that. Loss comes. Plans fail. People leave. Change is inevitable. And those who are unprepared are the ones who suffer the most. But those who have trained for it, those who have already rehearsed their response in their mind, meet hardship with clarity. Imagine two people who lose their jobs unexpectedly. One is devastated, caught off guard, drowning in anxiety and despair. The other is calm, not because they wanted this to happen, but because they had already thought about it before. They had already visualized what they would do next. They had already made peace with the impermanence of life, and so the loss, though difficult, does not break them. This is the power of dark visualization. Athletes do this all the time. A professional boxer doesn't just train for his perfect match. He prepares for getting hit, for exhaustion, for the moment when his body wants to give up but his mind must keep fighting. A mountain climber doesn't just picture reaching the summit. He envisions the storm, the cold, the moments of doubt. This is what makes them unshakable. So why don't we train for life in the same way? Think about the things you fear most. Maybe it's rejection, failure, losing someone you love. What if, instead of pushing these thoughts away, you sat with them? What if you visualized the worst happening, not in a way that invites anxiety, but in a way that allows you to prepare? If rejection comes, you will already know how to handle it. If failure happens, you will already have a plan to move forward. If loss arrives, you will have already made peace with the fact that nothing lasts forever. Doesn't that sound freeing? There's a teaching in Buddhism that says, when you are already dead, no one can kill you. At first, it sounds morbid, but the deeper meaning is profound. When you have already accepted impermanence, when you have already prepared your mind for loss, suffering has no control over you. There is nothing left to take. The monks understand this. That is why they meditate on death, not because they want to suffer, but because they want to stop fearing suffering. And what happens when you no longer fear suffering? You live fully. You love without hesitation. You take risks. You stop holding back because you realize that everything, in the end, is temporary. Most people hope for good times. They pray that things will stay the way they are. But hope is not a strategy. Hope is fragile. Hope is a candle in the wind. Instead of hoping that life spares you from hardship, why not train yourself to face it? Why not become so mentally strong that no matter what happens, you remain steady? When the storm comes, will you be the one who is swept away? Or will you be the mountain that stands tall, unshaken? The choice is always yours. Have you ever noticed how some people seem unshaken no matter what life throws at them? While others get swept away by emotions, setbacks, or the unpredictable nature of life, there are those who remain grounded, calm in chaos, steady in uncertainty. It's not because their lives are easier. It's not because they don't face challenges. It's because they live by a personal code, a set of guiding principles that shape their actions, decisions, and reactions. Most people live reactively. They respond to life based on how they feel in the moment. If something frustrates them, they snap. If someone offends them, they retaliate. If a situation is difficult, they complain. But what if, instead of reacting to life, you made a conscious choice about how you would live? What if you didn't let emotions dictate your actions, but instead allowed your principles to lead the way? The strongest people, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, don't live by impulse. They live by a personal life code. Imagine a ship in the middle of the ocean. The waves are relentless, constantly changing direction, shifting unpredictably. If the ship has no compass, no anchor, it is at the mercy of the sea, drifting wherever the wind takes it. But if the ship has a clear direction, if it has an anchor that keeps it steady, it doesn't matter how strong the waves are, it stays on course. You are that ship, and your life code is your compass. So ask yourself, what kind of person do I want to be? What values will I never compromise, no matter what? Most people never stop to define this for themselves. They go through life reacting instead of choosing. But when you take the time to consciously define your own principles, you create an unshakable foundation. You stop being tossed around by circumstances, because you already know who you are and how you will respond. Try writing down your own personal life code, not just a list of goals, but the unbreakable principles that will guide your decisions and actions. Maybe it looks something like this: I will not allow my emotions to dictate my actions. I will respond to challenges with patience and wisdom. I will focus on solutions, not complaints. I will act with integrity, even when no one is watching. I will treat others with kindness, regardless of how they treat me. I will remain calm in all situations. When you live by a strong life code, nothing can shake you. Think about it. How often do we regret the things we say or do in a moment of anger or frustration? How often do we make decisions we later wish we had thought through more carefully? But when you have a life code, you don't act on emotion alone. You pause. You remind yourself of the principles you have chosen to live by, and you respond accordingly. Monks live by this philosophy. They do not react to insults because they have already committed to inner peace. They do not chase after fleeting desires, because they have already chosen a path of mindfulness and simplicity. They don't waste energy on things beyond their control, because their life code is rooted in acceptance. Imagine what life would be like if you followed your own principles with the same level of dedication. If no matter what happened, you remained aligned with your values. Of course, this isn't easy. It's simple in theory, but in practice, it requires discipline. It's easy to say, I will stay calm in all situations, until someone tests your patience. It's easy to say, I will not allow emotions to dictate my actions, until you're in the heat of the moment. That's why a life code isn't something you just write down once and forget about. It's something you practice every day. Picture a warrior sharpening his sword. Every day he sharpens it even when there is no battle. Because he knows that when the moment comes, he won't have time to prepare. He must already be ready. Your life code is the same. You don't wait for hardship to test you. You live by it every day so that when challenges arise, you don't have to think about how to respond. You already know. The more you practice, the stronger your foundation becomes. At first, you may slip. You may react before remembering your code. But over time, it becomes second nature. You no longer have to remind yourself to stay calm, you just do. You no longer have to remind yourself to focus on solutions, you naturally seek them. And here's the real beauty of it. When you live by your own principles, you stop being controlled by external circumstances. Most people let life determine their mood. If things go well, they feel good. If things go wrong, they feel miserable. But when you live by a life code, your peace doesn't come from what happens outside of you. It comes from what you have already committed to inside of you. So ask yourself, what are the principles you refuse to break? What is the code you will live by no matter what happens? Because when you define that for yourself, you don't just react to life anymore. You take control. And when life throws its storms, you won't be the ship that drifts. You will be the one that stays on course. Steady, unshaken, unbreakable. At the end of the day, life will always be unpredictable. People will test your patience. Plans will fall apart. Challenges will come out of nowhere. But here's what really matters: how you respond. Emotional strength isn't about avoiding pain or pretending everything is fine. It's about learning how to face life without letting it break you. It's about choosing your reactions instead of letting emotions run the show. Imagine what could change if you practiced just one of these habits, just one. Maybe you pause before reacting. Maybe you start seeing challenges as lessons. Maybe you let go of something that's been weighing you down. You don't have to do it all at once. Just start somewhere. And if this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who might need it. Because wisdom, like kindness, grows stronger when we pass it on. Now, I've got a question for you. What's one habit you want to work on starting today? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear what speaks to you.